What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Alex Pereira says Khamzat Chimaev turned down fight. Chimaev responds. After Alex Pereira knocked out Israel Adesanya in the main event of UFC 281, the newly crowned champ quickly found himself being called out by the division's top contenders. Unsurprisingly, streaking contender Khamzat Chimaev was one of the first to call out the champ in a series of tweets. He called out for a quick turnaround fight with Pereira next year, while calling the former two-division Glory kickboxing champ easy money. While many thought that the call-out would fall on deaf ears, given that the UFC seems to be set on booking an immediate rematch between Pereira and Adesanya, the champ revealed on the MMA Hour this week that he actually accepted a fight with Chimaev for UFC 283 in Brazil, but the streaking contender rejected the fight. I went to my manager and said, "Look, I just did a hard weight cut. I can't make 185 for this right now. But tell the UFC I'll challenge him to fight me at 205 at UFC 283 in Rio." Chimaev didn't want it. He's a big guy. I'm a big guy. Let's do it at light heavyweight so we don't have to worry about a weight cut. We offered 205 for Rio. That didn't sit too well with Chimaev, who fired back shortly after on Instagram, saying that he asked about fighting the champ in Brazil before calling Pereira a fake champion. So far, no word yet from the UFC on whether or not the fight was close to getting booked, or if both men have embellished their stories slightly. Chimaev is currently in limbo, with the UFC reportedly in the midst of booking a welterweight #1 contender fight between Chimaev and Colby Covington. With the streaking contender recently missing weight for his scheduled bout with Nate Diaz, it'll be interesting to see whether the promotion truly books him a welterweight #1 contender bout, or if he winds up fighting at 185 pounds next. Jiri Prochazka eager to prove himself as champion after returning from injury. Last week, unfortunate news surfaced regarding Jiri Prochazka. With less than a month to go until his scheduled rematch with Glover Teixeira for the 205-pound title, the champion was forced out of the fight as a result of a shoulder injury sustained in training. Although there's been no official word yet on what sort of injury Prochazka sustained, UFC President Dana White went on record and called it one of the most horrific shoulder injuries the UFC's doctors have ever seen. Given that Prochazka is facing a lengthy layoff, he quickly relinquished the title so as not to hold up the division. As a result, the UFC then promoted the UFC 282 co-main event bout between former champion Jan Blachowicz and streaking contender Magomed Ankalaev to the main event slot and made that fight for the vacant 205-pound title. With Prochazka sidelined for the foreseeable future, many are wondering what the lengthy layoff will mean for his future in the UFC. In a string of tweets, the former champ revealed that he feels like a champion regardless of whether or not he holds the champion slot on the UFC's official rankings. There are no obstacles, just an opportunity to see the same path from a different angle and be stronger and more human. Once you accept the path of the warrior, or simply be absolutely honest to yourself, then you know deep inside what is false and what is true, where your path is. Title? I became the UFC champion 5 months ago, and the current situation does not change my inner feeling of being a champion. That is the feeling, and the reason why I started MMA, to be the champion of the best, and to be the best of the best. So far, no word yet as to when Glover Teixeira will return to the octagon. After the fight with Prochazka was scrapped, Teixeira reportedly agreed to fight for the belt with adequate time to prepare for a replacement opponent. With the UFC eager to keep a 205-pound title fight on the card for UFC 282, the promotion shot his plans for a title fight early next year down. Only time will tell if we get a Prochazka versus Teixeira 2 in the future. Before we continue, make sure you give that like button some love, and be sure to subscribe to the MMA Zone for all of the latest news. Paddy Pimblett isn't buying the Jake Paul hype. Despite Jake Paul picking up a decision win over Anderson Silva in Arizona recently, many have continued to doubt the controversial YouTube star. First, people doubted the legitimacy of his wins over Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley, with many accusing Paul of paying the former MMA stars to take a dive. Then Paul knocked Woodley out, which made the MMA community even more skeptical of his wins. If Woodley had gone 2 entire fights with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, one of the greatest strikers in UFC history, how did he wind up getting knocked out by Paul? Paul was then pitted against UFC legend Anderson Silva, a fight that many felt would see him get exposed. When the two men met in the ring, however, it was Paul who wound up picking up the decision, dropping Silva in the 5th round in a moment that has been subject to heavy scrutiny. Many felt as though Paul didn't land clean on Silva, which only further fueled speculation that the Spider was also paid to take a dive. During a recent podcast appearance, Paddy Pimblett spoke about the touchy subject, saying,
Jake Paul is actually not that bad now, even though I think his fights are fixed. I don't think the Tyron Woodley knockout was fixed, because when you get knocked out like that and you land face first, if you're not unconscious, you're going, You can't help it, it's a human reaction. But
So far, no word yet on when Paul will return to the ring. According to reports, he could meet controversial internet personality Andrew Tate in the ring next year. If that bout does happen, who do you think gets the win? Sound off in the comments below. Israel Adesanya confident Alexander Volkanovski can handle the strength of Islam Makhachev. When Islam Makhachev captured UFC gold by defeating Charles Oliveira in the main event of UFC 280, the newly crowned champion quickly found himself with a tough test in front of him. Moments after the fight, the featherweight champion and pound-for-pound kingpin Volkanovski was welcomed to the octagon in Abu Dhabi for his first stare-down with the champ. In the wake of the fight, the UFC booked a showdown between the two men for early next year in Perth, Australia, giving fight fans something to look forward to in 2023. Despite that, many have questioned how Volkanovski, who stands several inches shorter than Makhachev, will handle the size and strength of the dominant Dagestani fighter. Given the fact that Volkanovski used to weigh upwards of 200 pounds when he used to play rugby, his teammate Israel Adesanya isn't too worried about the pound-for-pound kingpin when he fights Makhachev. Speaking in an interview, he broke down the situation, giving Makhachev his props while pointing out why Volkanovski is simply different.
And Islam is great. Trust me. These Daggy boys, they know what they're doing. They have their own pedigree, and they're great. But again, I'm biased. Of course they're going to say that because it's my boy, but I truly, gun to my head, honestly, I could bet my whole house on it. Volk is just different, bro. Volk is just the kind of guy that even when he cuts weight, the amount of weight he cuts, for him to have the cardio he has in the later rounds, Jordy will tell you, the fight dietitian will tell you, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Like different, and the man's different.
As it stands right now, Volkanovski is a sizable underdog for the fight. With Makhachev the overwhelming favorite, it will be interesting to see how things play out when the two men step into the octagon on February 11th in Australia. And now for our breaking news story of the day.
This is a call out to Artem Lobov. I'm challenging you to a fight tonight, 10:30 p.m. I'll meet you down at SBG Concord and we'll fight for the whole lot. Going through and having lawyers message me about defamation and all this suing and all. You're a little blouse, mate. I'll see you at SBG Concord tonight, 10:30 p.m. and I'll fight you for the whole lot, yeah? Answer this fucking call out, yeah? You little blouse.
BKFC boss hopeful promotion can sign Nate Diaz. After Nate Diaz submitted Tony Ferguson to complete his UFC contract, it seemed as though there was no shortage of possibilities for the former Ultimate Fighter winner. With his stock at a near all-time high after he became the first man to submit Tony Ferguson in the UFC, Diaz revealed his intentions to compete in other combat sports before returning to the UFC down the road. In the days and weeks following the fight, Diaz was linked to a potential boxing match with Jake Paul, a potential boxing match with Floyd Mayweather under the Rizin banner, and a WWE appearance after he was photographed at a meeting with the royal couple of the WWE, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. Despite that, no formal plans for Diaz were finalized, leaving many to speculate as to what his next step would be. During a recent interview, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship boss David Feldman revealed that he is hopeful that the promotion can ink a deal with Diaz.
Realistically, I mean, I want Nate Diaz, and we weren't allowed to make a play for him yet because he was in that UFC window. This partnership I did with Triller, when this thing goes public in early January or late December, the funding is going to be available. I want everybody, and I don't mean to sound that cocky. I want everybody.
So far, no word yet from Diaz on where he would like to make his first stop following his UFC run. Of course, the Stockton superstar wouldn't be the first to sign with BKFC. Both Chad Mendes and Paige Van Zandt have fought under the promotion, with both alleging that they made more in one BKFC fight than they did in their entire UFC career. If Diaz does make the jump to bare knuckle boxing, how do you see things going for him? Give us your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.